When was the time you were suddenly more afraid of your best friend than a wild bear? My best friend Ivy looks over at me in the middle of our hike. So, we're lost. I chuckled, expecting her to say, gotcha. But instead, Ivy stared at me with a straight face. My smile dropped. You're serious? You have a map. Let me see that. I snatched the map from her and began scanning it over. This was my first time at the wildlife park, so I knew nothing about the trails or my surroundings. To make matters worse, the park had poor funding, which meant trails were barely marked, if at all, and fewer hikers came in general. So who knew if or when someone else would pass by to help us? The real icing on the cake, though, was that the park was known for one thing in particular: bears. We didn't want to attract any, so we had no food on us. And since we also didn't plan on camping, we had zero supplies of any kind except for water bottles. If we didn't find our way out of the woods or get rescued, we likely wouldn't survive the night. I'm frantically looking over the map when I noticed something odd in the corner. It was a state flag, but not for the state we were standing in. I look up at Ivy. What is this? This map is for a park in a completely different state. Somehow her face stays neutral, and she shrugs. Stupid mistake. But I saw cabins advertised on a billboard on our way in. They should be, you want to bunk in a cabin that may or may not be where you think it is with zero supplies? Absolutely not. We're gonna backtrack and leave the way we came. Ivy's face suddenly turned to anger. Why do we always have to do what you say? I froze in shock. What are you on about? I'm trying to get us out of here. Her face only became redder. You agreed to let me choose the hike and lead it, remember? Sure, but this is ridiculous. The cabins were advertised as fully stocked. We'll eat, rest, and then have more energy to make our way back in the morning. At this point, I was more confused than anything. Fully stocked? I'd never heard of camping cabins already having supplies stored inside. But before I could ask questions, Ivy turned from me and continued further into the woods. Every bone in my body told me to turn back, but I couldn't. Ivy was acting a little weird, but she had been my best friend since elementary school. I couldn't leave her in the woods by herself. 10 minutes later, I was standing with my mouth open in front of a log cabin. Ivy didn't hesitate and looked under the flower pots by the front door. I'm about to tell her that we'll need to break in, because there's no way the ranger would leave a spare key when she miraculously finds one. Inside, it's just like she said. It has a tiny kitchen, as well as a couple of folding cots leaning against the wall. But what really amazes me is that I check the freezer and find 2 TV dinners inside. You gotta be kidding me! I've never been to a campsite that gives out free food. I look over at Ivy, but she doesn't seem surprised. We heat the dinners and eat in silence. I'm worried Ivy is still upset with me, so I try to cheer her up. Hey, how about I take you to that new Greek place you were talking about? No thanks. I have a date planned there. Really? I didn't know you were seeing anyone. Do I know them? Ivy looks up from her meal and gives me a crooked smile. Maybe. It's a secret. Okay. I try not to be weirded out by the look in her eyes. I get up to toss my tray and happen to catch a glimpse of a fast food bag crumpled at the bottom of the trash can. An invasive thought kicks in. How did Ivy find the cabin without a map? And whose trash was that? A deep sense of dread washes over me. Things didn't feel real anymore, almost like they were too convenient. I do my best to ignore these feelings and the two of us head to bed. We're too convenient. I do my best to ignore these feelings and the two of us head to bed. As I'm lying there, unable to sleep, I realize that Ivy isn't snoring. We've had hundreds of sleepovers. She always snored. What feels like a long time passes, and then I hear her quietly sneak out the front door. I sit up and look over at her cot in confusion. There was a bathroom in the cabin. What was she doing? I then looked down at her notebook sticking out of her drawstring bag. She was constantly scribbling in that notebook and took it everywhere with her. I'd never thought about it before. It was just another weird thing Ivy did, but something told me to take a look. The first page I flipped to was covered in Ivy's and my boyfriend's names surrounded by hearts. As I flipped through, my blood ran cold. I read an elaborate plan to lure me into the woods at night, stage a scene to make it look like a bear had gotten to me, and then Ivy's plans to win over my boyfriend. If this was true, then Ivy was in the woods right now, looking for the knife she had hidden the day before. I booked it from the cabin with her notebook under my arm. There was just enough light from the moon to make my way back, and I pounded on the door to the ranger's office. It's been 6 weeks since the manhunt for Ivy started, and I'm still too afraid to go back into the woods.